Princess Adventure Stories. Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. A Windy Adventure. Snow White was visiting the seven dwarfs in their forest cottage. She woke up one windy morning to the sound of leaves blowing around outside her window. After a delicious breakfast, the seven dwarfs marched off to work in the mines. Snow White decided to clean up the cottage. She swept the floors and washed the dishes. Her woodland friends, an owl, a beaver, and a turtle, helped her. They helped. Then she opened the cupboards. Potatoes, 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 she sighed. If only there were something different to eat. Suddenly, she had an idea. I know. I'll pick some fresh berries and nuts in the forest and bake a gooseberry-nut pie. The owl, beaver, and turtle nodded excitedly. They thought that was a great idea. The owl helped Snow White fasten her cape around her neck. Then, together, they set off. As Snow White and her animal friends walked into the forest, the wind whistled through the trees. It tangled Snow White's hair and made her cheeks turn pink. But she didn't mind. With all the juicy berries and fallen nuts they were collecting, she would be able to make a lovely pie that evening. Before long, she came to a fork in the trail. I've never taken the trail on the right before, she said, pointing to the long, shady path. It would be nice to go exploring, Snow White continued. I'm sure there are nuts and berries along that path, too. Snow White looked at the trail. Not too far off, a wooden bridge swayed above the river. Just then, a gust of wind blew her toward the new path. She laughed. I think that's a sign, don't you? She asked her friends. They headed down the trail and across the rickety wooden bridge. On the other side of the bridge, the path curved. Snow White was sure it led somewhere special. The trail wound left and then right before opening into a sunlit grove. The clearing was filled with nut trees. How wonderful! Snow White exclaimed. She dashed from one to the other. There were walnut trees, chestnut trees, and almond trees. The grove even had a cluster of gooseberry bushes. Now you pick the nuts from the high branches, she told the owl. He saluted with one wing and flew to the very top of a tree. And you gather the ones on the ground, she said to the beaver. The little animal shook its tail and scampered off. And you, Snow White turned to the turtle, but he wasn't there. She laughed. It always took the turtle a little longer to catch up. That's okay. I'll take care of the berries. Snow White and her friends got to work. The wind whistled through the branches as Snow White filled her basket. Suddenly, a mighty gust of wind snatched Snow White's cape right off her shoulders. Oh dear, she cried. She got up and began to chase her cape through the woods. The wind carried it down a pebbled path and past a large rock. It flew farther and farther away. Finally, the cape snagged on a tree branch. Snow White untangled it, but when she turned around, she realized that she was lost. For a moment, Snow White was frightened. Then she put her hands on her hips. I'll just have to find my way back on my own, she said. Snow White looked around. Which way had she come from? The left or the right? Then she glanced at her feet. Her slippers were muddy. She'd left footprints in the dirt. I can follow my own tracks, she exclaimed. Good thinking, Snow. Snow White carefully followed her own trail of footprints. Soon, the ground changed from dirt to pebbles. There weren't any footprints here. Now, which way should I go? She wondered. Suddenly, she noticed a large rock up ahead. I passed that when I chased my cape, she exclaimed. Snow White hurried toward the rock. Once she was there, she could see the grove in the distance. Owl! Beaver! She called. Hearing her voice, the owl flew from the top of a walnut tree, and the beaver scampered out to meet her. They both looked very relieved. I had such an adventure, Snow White told them, picking up her basket. Then she looked around. Oh my, is Turtle not here yet? She asked. What if he got lost the same way I did? We had better go and find him. Snow White, Owl, and Beaver hurried back along the forest path. When they reached the river's edge, they discovered that the old bridge had broken. Oh no! Snow White cried. She could see the poor turtle. He was stranded on a rock in the middle of the water. The wind must have caused the bridge to fall with him on it. Now there was no way for Turtle to climb the steep walls of the riverbank. Snow White studied the ground where the bridge had been attached. The wooden stakes at one end had come loose and had been swept away by the water. Now the bridge dangled from the other side of the river, its rope ends trailing in the water. Don't worry, little turtle. We'll save you, she called. We'll save you. But the water was rushing too fast for her to swim. How could she rescue the turtle and fix the bridge? Owl can fly over, Snow White said thoughtfully, and Beaver is good at chewing. There must be something we can do. Suddenly, Snow White had an idea. She snapped a stick off a nearby tree and drew a picture of the broken bridge in the dirt. Here's what we need to do, she explained to her friends. Owl, if you fly to the other side and pick up the rope ends, Beaver can choose some new wooden stakes, and I can hammer them in place. Together, we can rebuild the bridge. The three friends went to work. The beaver liked to gnaw, so chewing new stakes from tree branches was easy for him. Once he was done, Snow White hammered the stakes into the ground with a rock. Meanwhile, the owl flew across the river and took the ends of the ropes in his beak. But the bridge was too heavy, so he hooted to some of his bird friends to help him lift it out of the water. Then Snow White pulled the bridge tight and tied the ropes to the stakes. Now that's what I call teamwork. Good as new. Thank me, she cried. Thank you, friends. Snow White quickly stepped onto the bridge. They had done such a good job, it hardly swayed at all. When she reached the middle, she dropped to her knees. Looking over the side, Snow White saw the turtle waiting on the rock just below her. But the water was picking up speed. She needed to help him right away. Snow White stretched down as far as she could and scooped the turtle up into her arms. She was just in time. A big gush of water washed right over the rock just as Snow White picked up the turtle. The turtle breathed a sigh of relief. He nuzzled Snow White to thank her. What are friends for? She said with a smile. I think that's enough adventure for one day. Let's head home and bake that pie. Together, the friends made their way back down the path. This time, they knew just where they were going. When Snow White and her animal friends got back to the cottage, she baked a lovely gooseberry-nut pie. Just as it was coming out of the oven, the 7 dwarves arrived home. That's mighty delicious looking, Bashful said softly. Do you have did you have any problems along problems today? Doc asked. Snow White winked at the owl, the beaver, and the turtle. Nothing we couldn't handle, she replied. The end. Remember, a friend in need is a friend indeed. And when we work together, we can accomplish anything. See you later. Bye.